It's another day of being criticized by Indians. I thought I would get used to it, and then I couldn't draw creative inspiration from their comments. However, I still underestimated Indians. They can always stimulate my nerves with strange thinking and make my creative power endless. For example, many Indians accuse me in the comment area. We admit that India is dirty, but there are too many poor people in India. Isn't it normal for a country to be dirty when it is backward? India's economy has taken off. We will soon become the world's third largest economy, and then become clean and modern. You will regret underestimating India. I don't really understand. Is there an inevitable relationship between dirtiness and poverty? I remember 30 years ago, when Chinese cities began to pay attention to hygiene, China was also very poor at that time. I just moved from the countryside to the county town. Because of my lack of experience, I often stepped on shits when playing with other kids. However, our county has a new county party secretary. He used violent means to punish unhygienic people, demoted or expelled officials with poor sanitation in the responsible area, and filmed people who urinated and defecated everywhere and broadcast them on TV. Those who maliciously destroyed public facilities or even disobeyed traffic rules were caught and read their confessions on TV. Guess what? It took less than a year for our county town to become clean. Then there was infrastructure construction and economic development. If a place is like India, where the smell of shit hits you as soon as you get out of the plane cabin, who would come to invest? Chinese officials 30 years ago could figure out this basic truth. So why 30 years later, there is still no qualified official in India who has stepped forward to correct the bad habits of Indians who are unhygienic? Why, when the Canadian girl accused you of defecating on the beach, you didn't reflect on your mistakes, but attacked her for not respecting Indian culture? If pooping everywhere is a country's culture, then this country should not exist on the earth. As for what the Indians said, India will become the world's third largest economy. I have no doubt. But by that time, India will still be one of the poorest countries in the world, and its per capita GDP will be lower than some African countries. I mean, if India's economic growth stops and it is still very poor in the next 20 years, then you will not change in the next 20 years and would rather live in such a shithole environment as now? Even for your children, shouldn't you make India cleaner? I, who criticize India every day, hope that India can become clean. Why do you love India so much, but are unwilling to make changes for India? Is littering and urinating and defecating anywhere really so fascinating? If you don't change your hygiene habits, India will not become clean even if it becomes rich. Because cleanliness has no direct relationship with wealth. I saw an inconspicuous news on a Chinese app. A netizen shared a roadside market in a rural area of Vietnam. Most people praised it for being comfortable and clean. Vietnam is poorer than China, right? Vietnam's total GDP is not as much as a first-tier city in China, but why can it be clean? Some people say that the Chinese are hostile to Indians, so they slander India. This is simply bullshit. China and India did have a war in 1962, but the Indian army collapsed in that war, and the Chinese did not suffer any major casualties, so there is no hatred for India. China and Vietnam had a large-scale war in 1979, and there were border conflicts in the following decade. The Vietnamese army performed 100 times better than the Indian army and caused serious casualties to the Chinese. If the Chinese want to be hostile, shouldn't they be more hostile to the Vietnamese? But no one in the comments on this news mentioned the past war, because the topic we are talking about is very simple. That is, the rural markets in Vietnam are very clean and beautiful. Although some netizens said that there may be many mosquitoes, it is not slandering Vietnam, right? More importantly, let's look at this comment. A netizen whose hometown is in the central province said that the market in the picture is very similar to their hometown. But he was immediately ridiculed by other netizens. Some people pointed out that the market in the picture is much cleaner than the market in the Central Plains. Yes, The Central Plains probably refers to Hunan and the surrounding provinces. The economy is definitely much better than Vietnam, but the sanitation conditions in the countryside are really different from those in Vietnam. The rural areas in China's southern provinces, coastal provinces, and even the southwest are very clean. But the rural areas in the central and northern provinces are indeed not as clean as Vietnam. This is an objective fact, and the Chinese never avoid it even on their own social media. Only when you know your mistakes can you have the motivation to correct them. If all Indian netizens are like those who refuse to admit that they are backward, how can India make progress? Through a simple comparison, I hope that some Indian netizens can understand. 1. Poverty is not an excuse for dirtiness. Hygiene is a basic quality of human beings. If the quality of the people is low, the cities and villages will be dirty. 2. A developed economy is not necessarily clean. Let alone the central and northern provinces of China mentioned in my video, even in the big cities of the United States and Europe, there are many areas that are very dirty. They are not because of poverty, but because the quality of the people living there is not high and the local government is poorly managed. I believe that there must be dirty places in Vietnam, but the Vietnamese government is definitely working hard to improve it instead of escaping from reality. 3. Dirtiness does not necessarily lead to poverty, but dirtiness will make a village, a city, a region, and a country miss many development opportunities. India has become a nightmare in the hearts of tourists and investors around the world. If it does not change, it will be blacklisted by more and more people and become an isolated island in the world. Finally, I would like to ask Indian netizens, why will I regret it if India becomes clean and modern? India's improvement of the sanitary environment is to allow Indians to live a better life, not to make me regret. What part of your brain is broken? Why do you always say such ignorant things? I will never go to India again in my life. I don't want to experience the endless stench, the streets full of garbage, and the various scammers who keep pestering you and shaking their heads. You shouldn't fantasize about surpassing China to become a superpower all day long. Whether India becomes a superpower has nothing to do with the Chinese. What you should do most now is to study how China solves urban sanitation problems and how to solve environmental pollution, especially air pollution. You know, China has improved the environment and achieved sustainable development while achieving industrialization. If you keep thinking about competing with China in military with the ridiculous LCA fighter jets and aircraft carriers made of parts from all over the world, instead of immediately controlling pollution and improving the environment, it will be a luxury to breathe fresh air in New Delhi in 10 years. If India really achieves cleanliness and modernization, I will not regret it and I will bless you. But I emphasize again that I will never go to India again in my life, because it is difficult for me to believe any word of the Indian media.